So reviewing where we are in this sugya, okay, on Sukka Chaf Hey Amud Aleph Chaf Hey Amud Beis. The question is like this. The Gemara's question is, there's two sources we have for Osek BeMitzva Pater BeMitzva. Okay, one source is the case by the Korban Pesach. What happened by the Korban Pesach? These guys, right? They became Tamei Meis. As a result of becoming Tamei Meis, what happened?
They could do
the Korban Pesach. It was 7 days later. Okay. The other example is we know from Kriya Shema, B'shivtecha b'veisecha. Okay, and that teaches you if I'm Osek in a mitzvah, I'm pater in a mitzvah. Okay. What's the ready question? What's the classic case of Kriya Shema? The classic case of Kriya Shema is the Chassan case, which what happens? I'm getting married, right? So if I'm getting married, I'm now pater from Kriya Shema. Okay. Forget Tarud, forget Maisa. We're done with that already. This is a completely different question the Gemara is dealing with. No, good point. You're making a good point. The point you're making is that you're saying that, so what must pater here mean? You're saying, what do you mean is pater? You have to do Pesach Sheni. Now, first of all, factually, because of this event, what happened? They created Pesach Sheni. Okay, let's put that aside. What does pater here mean?
Pater at this instant?
No, think about...
Pater from the first time you're able to do the mitzvah?
What's the consequence of being pater here?
You miss out on...
You have to do it again.
But prior to that, though. If you can do it again, what does that therefore mean insofar as the...
Pater means you're removed from obligation.
Oh, right. Which means that you don't get what?
Kares.
Yeah. That's the consequence of being pater here. You're not chayv kares.
Why is that a consequence?
In other words, it's a funny thing. You have to realize this isn't directly related to the sugya, but it's an amazing thing. The guys who did this weren't stupid. They were halachic people. How do you know that? Because they chose to become Tamei Meis, and they said they were relying on Osek mitzvah pater mitzvah. So when they did this, right? And according to Havmina, when they created the P'tur meant that they wouldn't be chayv kares for missing out Korban Pesach, but they wanted to kiyum. They wanted to have Korban Pesach. That's why they went to Moshe. But they were pater here means that they weren't chayv kares.
So let's say they didn't do Pesach.
Okay, but now going in order here. So now the question the Gemara has is, what do you need both psukim for? What do you need both things for? Korban Pesach and Kriya Shema, right? Why? Okay,
to teach us something else.
Right? Why both? Okay. Now, if you only had Korban Pesach. Right? Let's assume you only had Korban Pesach.
Why pater or why both?
Why pater? Why in other words, what's the P'tur? So if I only have Korban Pesach, what would you think? You would think that when I became Tamei, right, there was no chiyuv of Korban Pesach at that time. Right? When was Korban Pesach? A week later.
Yeah.
So when they became Tamei Meis, there was no reality to Korban Pesach. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says that exactly. He says Shenitmu, right? There was no chiyuv of Korban Pesach. But by the case of Kriya Shema, okay, now this is what you have to understand. This is the critical thing. By Kriya Shema, okay, what happens? I'm at my wedding. I'm getting married. When I'm getting married, right, at that moment in time, am I chayv in Kriya Shema?
No.
Okay, now Zman... No, why? Because let's say it's early. Now Zman Kriya Shema comes. So what would the Havmina say? The Havmina would say by Kriya Shema is that... Why? But why do both? Why? Why do both? Rashi explains why.
When you were first Osek in the first mitzvah, the second mitzvah wasn't a reality to you. So when it becomes a reality, you have to do it.
But 1 second. How do you get around the problem of Eino L'Kayim both?
You have time
because
this is the key. This is such a critical point to get this far. Okay.
You have time to do the first mitzvah beforehand.
No. What do you mean? You don't. I'm in the middle of my chuppah. Okay. Now it's time for according to Havmina. This isn't how we paskin.
So
Zman Kriya Shema comes. No. Now you finish. No.
You do both simultaneously?
No. Neither. What's it say? It's saying like this. It's saying that what can I do? I can stop my chuppah. How long does Kriya Shema take? 2 minutes, and then do what?
Go back
to the chuppah. Have I lost anything?
No.
Oh, so that's what the Havmina is saying. The Havmina, I'm not no svara yet, but the Havmina is saying is that
pause what you're doing,
exactly,
and then continue.
Right. That's what it's saying. It's saying you should do that. Pause, because what are you losing? So you leave the chuppah for a minute, but it's still there. You'll go right back to the chuppah for 2 minutes. Big deal. Okay, so what now?
Wait, chuppah or just wedding night in general?
Just for now, it means the wedding night. But let's assume chuppah. Now the Gemara says, but since we have now that you have. Well, you can. Now that you have Kriya Shema, now you have the case of Kriya Shema, we know Osek mitzvah pater mitzvah. So the conclusion is, and you need both to teach you that even in this case of Kriya Shema, you're Osek mitzvah pater mitzvah. Okay, clear?
Yeah.
Now other ends. Okay, you only have the case of Kriya Shema. So what would you think? You would think that when everything's equal, Osek mitzvah pater mitzvah works, right? Because if you look at the mitzvah Kriya Shema and the mitzvah chuppah, they're like equal. Okay, but what's Korban Pesach? Korban Pesach, what do you get if you don't do it? Kares. So when something is more stringent, so then what happens? The P'tur won't work. Okay, Kamash Malan, the conclusion is, need both, because we see in the case of Korban Pesach, you're pater as well. So how do you define this? Okay, how do you define this? We've defined already Osek BeMitzva. We have that idea down. We know what that means. We know what Hisaskus means. We discussed Tarad. We discussed Maisa. Now the question is, what does pater BeMitzva mean? What does that mean? That's it. Now, if you don't learn analytically, you would never catch this point. You'd read the Gemara as like two separate topics. But when the Gemara is looking for the source, right? What it's really asking is, you'll see in how we define it, what does it mean to be pater BeMitzva? That's one thing I'll tell you. The other thing I'll give you a hint on, which is a starting point, is from the conclusion. Okay, the conclusion tells us what? The conclusion tells us that in both cases, Osek BeMitzva, pater BeMitzva. So if you can understand the idea the Maskana is telling you, then you can open up and work backwards to understand why the Havamina doesn't make sense. The Maskana of the Gemara is telling you that what the Gemara is telling you, we're going to start with the Maskana first. What the Gemara is telling you is that when you're Osek BeMitzva, okay, what's the status of that second mitzvah that comes along? What's its status? Nothing. Doesn't exist.
To you.
To you, in your framework, there's no existence of it. When I'm getting married, I'm involved in chuppah, it doesn't mean that there's no reality to Kriya Shema. My status as a chassan means that by definition, when this comes along, it doesn't register. There's no R word. There's no registering of L'Shem Dylan. There's no registering of that second mitzvah in my framework. It doesn't exist. Okay? Why do you have to say that? Because the Havamina is saying is that Havamina is treating it as if the second mitzvah exists. So if the second mitzvah exists, now what?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, no. When?
Yesterday.
Yeah, no. But you got to put in the right framework. In other words, if there's a reality to the second mitzvah, but we know there's a principle of Osek mitzvah, pater mitzvah, what do we have to start doing? Well, one intuitive direction to go in is, what does Osek mitzvah, pater mitzvah, mechayiv to do? You must evaluate every single other mitzvah. And if you're going to evaluate every single other mitzvah, what would you start taking into account? Stringency. Which one's more important? Right? Which is more important? So that's one. That's a svara for this side. This side's saying this is the easy side.
The other side.
What's this side saying? This side is saying beautifully. This side's saying that if there's a reality to the other mitzvah, then you have to evaluate. And evaluation means which one's more chamor. That would be a determinant so far as how the patur would emerge.
Yeah.
That's the easy side. Now, what about the other side? Even better for you. There's, in my opinion, there are two things or two factors you would have to evaluate if that second mitzvah it does exist in your framework, but you want to be pater. One is severity. Okay, that's one.
Like,
which was stronger on the scale? Okay.
In what sense? Like,
what's the other thing though? What's the other thing? And this is the hard one. This is very abstract, but this is, I think, the svara for the Gemara. I'm just going to put this on tape now because I want to make this clear. Now, imagine for a second we have three cases. Okay. We'll do the two extremes first and the one in the middle. Okay, so we know about Korban Pesach. Why you pater by Korban Pesach? You pater by Korban Pesach because right now, right, according to Rashi, when I'm mitame meis, he says the lo matazman chiyuva. Right, he says lo igiyazman achilas Pesach. There's no reality to my chiyuv Korban Pesach. So if I go ahead and mitame meis now, right, by being mitame meis, I won't be able to do Korban Pesach, but I'm not chayim Korban Pesach right now, so I don't have to worry about that. That's one. The other end of the spectrum is Kriya Shema. By Kriya Shema, if I leave the chuppah, right? Why does Patur not work? Because if I leave the chuppah and I do Kriya Shema, it takes 2 minutes. I'll go back and do chuppah again, right? The missing case would be where Patur would seem not to work, would be where by leaving mitzvah A and doing mitzvah B, I can't do mitzvah A anymore. Then Patur would definitely work. So what do they all three share in common? There's one underlying thing they all share in common that they're concerned about. What do you mean by capability? The key word here, the determining factor, is consequence. Now what do I mean by that? Great, I said the word. Now what do I mean by that? What do we mean by consequence? Think about that word and why it's exactly what's going on here. Okay? I'm going to propose the following. Okay? When is it when is the patur?
There's actually like a nafkamina of doing.
Okay, but it's got to be more than that. But you're right. Okay, but step one: when am I pater BeMitzva? Remember, BeMitzva means reality to the second mitzvah. Yeah. The patur emerges right only when there's no consequence to my leaving mitzvah A. Yeah. Okay, in other words, there'd be nothing pogea in my his askas and mitzvahs a. So I take a break from the chuppah, I say Kriya Shema, and I go back to the chuppah again. No consequence, okay? But if I were involved in mitzvah A and there would be a consequence, right? Then the Patur wouldn't work. Okay? The Patur won't work. Right?
From B?
From B. In other words, let's say by going to B, I will lose out on A.
Right.
Then you can't say Osek mitzvah, Patur mitzvah, because there's a consequence there.
But you're chayav in that case?
The Korban Pesach case is telling you that, think about it. As we said before, what's the formula? The formula is, right, the formula is very good. When there's a consequence that emerges from a mechayev, but by the case of Korban Pesach, you have the consequence. I have a consequence. I can't do the Korban Pesach, but what's it lacking? A mechayev. I'm not chayav in Korban Pesach now. So does halacha, does that consequence register in the halachic system? No. That's why you're patur. That's the Havamina. So now think about why this is beautiful.
Even it was
Wait. If you're telling me that in Osek mitzvah, Patur mitzvah, in the Havamina, that the second mitzvah is a reality, there will be two things you would have to evaluate. Either you evaluate, or both. You evaluate chamor, right? Well, which mitzvah is, what's going to guide you, right? You have to evaluate every situation. Is it more chamor or not? And what's the other factor? In leaving mitzvah A, what halachic consequence will emerge? But that halachic consequence can only be a halachic consequence. And what's a halachic consequence? One that emerges from mechayev. So there's no mechayev on me right now, there's no halachic consequence to speak of. Thus the Korban Pesach case, that's why you're patur there. We're not done with Osek mitzvah, Patur mitzvah though. There's one other extremely difficult issue we're going to take up, which is the question of...
chas.
No, that's...